back, everybody. Dr. Brown.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So nice to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity today. It's been an impactful and informative couple days already. And as we begin the sharing around the equity work that we're doing district-wide and we're hoping to lead going forward, it seems important to acknowledge the threads of equity that we've heard already in the last 2 days. And so I was thinking, well, enjoying the presentations, that we really have this umbrella idea of equity that we're working from. And we've heard traces of that connected to safety, connected to curriculum, connected to the ways that we're using data, connected to how we're supporting special student groups, connected to the way that we will be developing policy and therefore informing our practices. And so if equity is the umbrella, it seems really important to highlight as we begin the sharing with you today that equity is not one thing. Equity needs to be everything. It needs to be the lens that we use to look through all the work that we do. And that brought me back to thinking about the creation of All Means All. That goes back several years, long before the stickers were made. It was something that we were talking about, and we were talking about it in the way that we wanted to encourage our schools and our community, our parents, our staff to think differently about opportunities provided for students, specifically students with special needs. And just in full transparency, several years ago, we would get questions in the Office of School Support Services around should students in special day classes go on field trips, who should purchase materials for students with special needs on our school campuses, should students with special needs have access to extracurricular activities? And the answer to all of those things became all means all. Absolutely, because all means all, right? And so now, several years later, we have masks. We never knew several years ago we would be making masks for anybody, much less with all means all. We have stickers, we have t-shirts, we have reusable grocery bags that proudly suggest all means all. I think it's something we believe. I'm here to put out today that it is not enough. All means all is about access. All means all opens a door, but equity is the quality that we want to see on the other side of that door. We need to do more. And so as we move forward, and Dr. Baker is going to join me in the sharing of some of the work that we both have done and will continue to do, I want to put out this idea that all means all is good. All means all is not enough. And as we move forward, equity means quality. So today, we hope to share with you what we have done, what we are doing currently, and then what we hope to do in relation to the conversation about our equity policy work and the way that we will be moving forward with an equity policy and an equity leadership team. So Dr. Baker has used this connection in sharing with principal groups and with many groups over the last couple of years. It's actually something that goes back quite a few years. And it's the concept of how are all the children? How are all the children is actually used as a greeting. And we'll show just a brief 2-minute video that really captures the essence of what this means. But the Maasai tribe in the eastern part of Africa uses how are all the children as an expression of strength that the community is well. The idea being that we are not well unless all of the children are well. And I would add to that, not that all of the children are present or that all of the children have a seat at the table, but that all of the children around the table are well. And so with that, my colleague, Mr. Itzen, is going to cue up the video.
Dr. Brown, give me 1 second.
It's okay, Chris. I'll keep going. Oh, he got it. Okay. Thank you.
It's on the browser.
I'm going to keep on going. So watch the video. It's 2 minutes and it's worth it. But it really tells the story that I just shared. The story is about how are all the children well? And it causes us to ask the question, how are our LBUSD children? What are we willing to do individually to ensure that all of our children are well? And what are we willing to do collectively as a community, as a school district, as groups within our school district to ensure that all of our children are well? And I'm encouraging that this becomes the platform for our go forward. And it also requires tremendous vulnerability, both in the work and the sharing of people, as we talk momentarily about how we'd like to lift up voices of those who have had experiences that we need to learn from. There's tremendous vulnerability and challenge and risk-taking in the work. And so I think the question that we need to continue to challenge ourselves with is how courageous are we willing to be in this work? Dr. Baker has been leading this charge going back several years. And so as a move forward point from today, she's going to highlight some of the equity work that's been happening over the last few years in our district.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. If you'll do the slides
I will.
for me, then I'll
got
just stand. I'm just going to spend a few minutes because we also have some really important guests that are here to share about the work that's happening across the district. When you look at this slide, this gives you just a visual representation of the continuation of district-wide work that I can say has dramatically accelerated our equity work over the last several years. Work that has included every school leader across our system, incorporates the tenets of all means all and inclusive practices, and has had a very intentional focus through the supervision and support to principals and the level offices of how to improve equity from a school perspective. That lens of systemic oppression is the work of the National Equity Project, a nationally recognized organization that helps school systems, to do better when they think about equity inside their district. The framework that you see, those circles, a Venn diagram of sorts, is a way of thinking, it's a way of questioning, and it's a way of challenging what exists in order to dismantle oppression, to address issues of inequities, and to do better so that you can actually answer that question, how are all the children, and be in a better place than we are right now. So that represents a lot of work. You can see our school leaders have engaged in work at an individual level through discussion, through reflection, through coaching with their principal supervisor. They have, on the right-hand side, you can see a triangle that actually represents a whole body of work around equity audits at the school level. principals working with their teams to think about a focus in working with teacher teams and others to address issues of equity. And then at an interpersonal level, where all that comes together to think about the relationships of people, the hearts and minds and belief systems that go into all of this work. So I want to just give you a few tangible examples of how this work is actively happening in a sequence of things. And I'll point to this actually shares how we have moved from talking about gap closure strategies to embedding equity into the fabric of everything that we do. So talking about gap closure strategies is a great thing. It's just not a complete aspect of what we do. And so one example of how we've done that is in our work with leaders across the district, in our study of getting better as a system, we recognize that we need to actually name what are the dispositions of equity leaders. So that was a first level. This year, on the right-hand side, that image represents that all principals and assistant principals now, those dispositions are embedded into our performance expectations for how principals and assistant principals, and we'll sequence into others, how they are expected to use the skills of equity leadership in their day-to-day work so that it is actually embedded into the fabric of everything that we do.
Can you say that piece again?
Yeah, sure. So this is So this is an example of, as we learned a couple of years ago, better ways of thinking about what does it actually mean to be a leader for equity? What are the dispositions of, what are the research-based dispositions of equity leaders? We brought in, actually out of the New York Leadership Academy, these equity leadership dispositions, and we worked with them for a couple of years. Our principal supervisors coached principals differently. They assessed the work of principals differently, but it wasn't totally embedded into the fabric of what we do. The image on the right-hand side is actually one page of 7 domains that our principals and assistant principals are evaluated upon. And so we took what was like pilot level work or small scale work, went through a whole revision process of our expectations, our performance expectations for administrators, to embed those dispositions in every different aspect of the work of a leader, rather than seeing it as a side item to what leaders do. Does that help?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Could you pull your mic a little?
Sure. When you look at another example that I wanted to bring to you, and you actually have a handout at your place that is a representation that Dr. Kelly On prepared for today around the work of the Wallace Grant. So as I go into this slide, I just want to highlight a few things from that handout. I'm not going to read all of it to you. But you know that our Leadership Development Office has undergone a redefinition as the Equity Leadership and Talent Development Office. And you'll actually hear from the newest member of the team today, Raquel Welch-Kitchen, who will be a part of the later presentation. Our work with the Wallace Foundation has been part of the accelerant to our equity work, especially with school leaders. And the cover page of your handout represents work from 2014 until the present, and initiatives that we have interacted with the Wallace Foundation on that are ending right now in 2020 around Equity Pipeline Exploratory Grant. So the packet that you have represents the 8 deliverables that Dr. On and team, myself, and a consultant, those in the room, and some other focus groups, prepared to respond to 8 deliverables all around equity. Much of this work is centered around how do you prepare a pipeline of people from teacher all the way through perhaps a superintendent with equity in the leadership pipeline. But as you can imagine, a deliverable around defining equity is important because you can't prepare people if you don't have a clear definition. And this is where some of the work with leaders and the change in domains and dimensions has come out. So among those 8 deliverables, there is an equity audit, and on this slide that I'm showing, you can see that we're moving this year from schools auditing their practices to a district audit. Interesting to find out in the work that we've done in this grant, there's actually not an off-the-shelf kind of audit for a school district to use that actually reflects all of the different things that you would think about if you're auditing a district relative to equity. like the district's stance on equity, equitable outcomes to learn, equity in operations. And so part of our partnership in this grant with Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry and other researchers is to contribute to the development of a tool that will be used here, that will be integrated into my first year goals, but that will also inform the field nationally on what it would look like to audit a district around issues of equity, and then to set goals around issues of equity in a district. And then lastly, as part of that work, because I want to pass it back to Dr. Brown, as part of that work, several years ago we needed to have a definition to use as we talked to folks in the field and talked to both teachers and principals and others around equity. We knew it wasn't the definition that would be our long-term definition, but we had a place to start. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see work out of the principal supervisor learning community. We adopted something that we had learned through the New York Leadership Academy. I know all of you, as board members, you recently participated in an interview with the consultant from the Wallace Grant to explore, when you think about equity, what does that mean to you as individuals? In addition to you all, multiple focus groups were held that included students, some community partners, administrators, some teachers. And so all of that information that was part of a deliverable for a grant is now getting passed to Tiffany and her work that she will do with an equity leadership team, with policy recommendation. And so where we're passing off is not just starting fresh, it's starting with a really good set of data, qualitative data in mind to offer into the work that we'll do around equity. So we plan to redefine through the work of the equity leadership team and through policy what it means in Long Beach Unified when we say, here's how we define equity. So I can answer any questions or we can pass back to Dr. Brown.
I just have a quick question. Is this information available online? Or
This will be. This is all being translated for posting on our district website.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So our hope in the sharing that Dr. Baker just offered is to really emphasize the point that this work is far from done, but there is a very solid foundation upon which to build our next steps. And so in relation to two components that I'll talk about in the slide, and then I'll be asking for your engagement in the thinking around some of our next steps. We've talked about equity in a couple of different ways, even in the last couple days, around the development of policy, and then in the idea of the development of an equity leadership team. And so I want to talk about both of those concepts here. In relation to policy development that we want, Dr. Williams, who's not here today, I hope he's either watching or he will watch. Yesterday he said 4 times policy should inform practice. He said that 4 different times during the day, I counted. And that seems important to highlight here. The policy development process is the idea of what we want to go forward. And I am proposing the idea that we should have tremendous equity in the equity work. To me, that means that we are lifting unheard voices and that we are focusing on how we lift up the voices of people's lived experiences. That we go forward with guided research, best practice, and other district models that will be assisted from the Wallace work. But a frame that I would like to recommend we use going forward is that we don't just guide ourselves by the voices that share and share often. We guide ourselves in looking for the voices of those who are not speaking, which means that we need to go to them. We need to find them, we need to call them, we need to ask them, how can we support you better? Where did things break down for you? Where might we have captured you at an earlier point? Presentations that we've heard in the last 2 days have addressed the need to do those very things through the way we're outreaching students and families in all ways. But true engagement is not just that we listen when somebody speaks, it's that we look for people that are not speaking and say, how can we learn from you? In relation to an equity leadership team, which has been proposed and is going to be something that will be asked, the Board of Education will be asked for input on this idea. It's thinking about how do we proceed for here, and I'm proposing, and I'll show a graphic on the next slide that kind of highlights this, that we look about the input that we gather around the equity policy in terms of tiers. We want this group to be comprised of stakeholders that speak for our most vulnerable populations, but also that any member would be connected to an input group or a body, so that they are always representing voices of those in our community that we need to be listening to. And then I'll just highlight again that equity work requires relationship, transparency, and risk-taking. This is not perfect work. This is not work that happens without disagreement. And this is actually work that if we will allow the conflict to exist, if we will allow that rub to occur, that's where we get to the good stuff. It doesn't feel good as it's happening, but through that, that's where we get to the good stuff. And I will say that I feel honored about the opportunity to lead some of our next steps, and I've become increasingly uncomfortable in that rub. So we talk a lot about vulnerability in leadership, which sounds really great until we're really vulnerable. And then it doesn't both sound so great or feel so great, but I'm here to say with the quality of the people in this room and so many others who aren't here, we are ready to do that vulnerable work and really push this to the next place. So the guiding question there is, how can we really hear those who don't freely share? And how can we create processes that allow that to happen? And so if you'll look with me at this diagram, which is a familiar diagram to people in the district and work that we've done prior related to response to intervention, which actually 10, 15 years ago was an equity movement of the time. But if you think in terms of tiers here, looking at tier 1, the yellow bottom of the pyramid, student and community input, the focus in this graphic is that student voice, community voice should inform how we go forward. It should inform the questions that we're asking of other groups, and it should really be our guide for how we tap the next group, which are the district committees that we already have in place. So it's this concept that at each point, the group, as we move up this pyramid, lessens in size, but that continues to inform the next steps that we're taking. So that bottom platform is a student voice, where we have a tremendous commitment to engaging students in different ways. And by that, I mean every student. I mean students that have not met with success in our system. I mean students that we may have lost. I mean students that are receiving failing grades or have struggled with attendance or behavior. I'm suggesting that we outreach to those students and say, how could we have done better for you? Talk with us, me, them about the experience that they've had, and let their voices inform how we go forward. That is a win-win. It's both information for us, and it's an intervention for any young person to be able to reflect on and guide us in terms of how we could do more to decrease the number of students that fall into that category. We have tremendous leadership in our district committees. We have work around the LCAP. We have the Superintendent Advisory Committee. We have DCAC, DLAC, CAC. The acronyms go on and on. I'm not excluding anyone. There are too many to name here, but I'm not suggesting that this work is absent of any one of those groups. I'm suggesting that as we move forward to an equity leadership team, we use the platform that we have amongst each of those groups to inform what that equity leadership team becomes. And then lastly, as you look at the top of the pyramid, is this equity leadership team. And that is going to be in part determined through input from you as the Board of Education and from a process that we define together, so that somebody who's watching this right now and says, how can I get on that equity leadership team? We have a plan for how we could engage people in that work. And we have some criteria around who we would like to be tapping to be a part of that group. You can see from the arrows that are drawn here, as we move up from the bottom of the pyramid, we get more input, which informs policy. And as we think about the top of the pyramid being the idea of this equity leadership team, that group is also going to have input into the policies that we develop going forward. And the most important thing in all of this is that it's not any one conversation. It's a commitment to an ongoing conversation, because equity needs to be the lens that we use to look through everything. So let's kind of open up some ways of dialoguing around the idea of this equity leadership team. And I'll just put out some ideas that in coming weeks we'll be engaging you in further dialogue about. So any ideas that you have to offer now are welcomed, but there's no pressure that this is the only opportunity to weigh in. I think we need to have a process for determining participation in this group, and it seems that that should be both a combination of nomination, which could be a self-nomination or an invitation, for a person, a community representative, et cetera, to participate in this work. I'm recommending that we also have an application process and some sort of criteria for participation. Desire to participate is not enough, and we need people who have connection to real boots on the ground work and are also willing to lift up those voices in the work that we do going forward. We need to develop some clearly defined goals and outcomes for what we would like to see from the work of this equity leadership team. And then we also need a creation of timeline for next steps. And so with that, again, I hope that you'll share some thoughts today. These thoughts do not need to be completely answered or fleshed out today, but I really welcome any input that you have. And just kind of as a next steps, we referenced at the last board meeting that this work will be an update item at each Board of Education meeting, similar to the process that Mrs. Ashley led with the superintendent search. And so going forward, at each meeting, we will have an opportunity to weigh in on any of these topics where I think we need to define together publicly with input and transparently around the design of this group, so that we don't hear, following the selection of this group, I didn't know about it. How come I couldn't apply? We want to really be out there in terms of how we are talking about the work that we want to do. And then going forward, the creation of a timeline of input for Tier 1. So how do we really engage the student groups and the community groups? And I know through work with students, which is always favored work, and it's such enjoyable and informative work, that nobody knows how to better engage students than students. So when I was a school psychologist, I could say to a student I was working with, who else should I meet on this campus? They were the best source of referral, and I believe that they will lead us to other young people that we need to be hearing from. So just the idea that we don't just want to listen to them, we want to engage with them in how we ask them, what we ask them, and encourage them to lead us in a way that tells the story of that we need to hear, but is both comfortable and set up for young people in the way that we know young people interact with adults. Next, we need to plan for input and conversation for how all of those district committees will be accessed. And then finally, we need to make a selection of an equity leadership team that includes a timeline for goals, for feedback, and for ongoing community forums. We should be leading the community forums that are happening. If there's a community forum that focuses on the work of Long Beach Unified School District, Long Beach Unified School District needs to lead that forum. And we need to have a platform to include all of the community partners that we both celebrate with, benefit from, and need going forward. But that's the work that we need to be leading. And so as I welcome any comments, thoughts, questions that you have, I want to make a suggestion that we start to shift. We're never going to put away all means all, but I think we should start to shift to equity means everything. I feel a new set of stickers coming on. So with that, it just seems so important to end by saying that equity is not the place that we go to, it's the place that we go from. And it's how we set that up going forward that will inform the quality of what we do, and therefore the quality of what we get. So I welcome any thoughts, questions that you'd like to share today, knowing this is not an only opportunity.
Well, I'm just going to start by saying that I appreciate the foundation of your pyramid as being the students and the community voice. I think that's an excellent visual on what we value. And so thank you for doing that. Do we have any other comments? Okay, Ms. Kerr.
Thank you for all of this, and thank you for acknowledging that all of the conversations we've had over the last 2 days lead to this and go 100 other places from here. And that acknowledging we have a great foundation on which we can build. And I too appreciate that you have students and community at the bottom. And I really appreciate you acknowledging that the conversations that are happening in the community right now regarding our work should be led by us. Yeah. And we know that we have been so focused on closing schools, keeping kids, safe over the summer, restarting schools, teaching, we have been in the thick of so much work. And I know a lot of folks have been working almost round the clock. I get emails at very interesting times. From staff. So we know that it isn't because this isn't important to us. We also know that the plate is really full in this moment. But I appreciate the acknowledgement that we have work to do in how we engage conversations around our work. And even when we're busy, we are learning new tools every day to do that, even in the midst when we have a very full plate. So I appreciate the acknowledgement of work that we need to do. And I really appreciate the talk about unheard voices and lived experiences and finding the folks who aren't speaking, which I think speaks to some of the work we were doing earlier of how are we reaching out to people we haven't heard from, whether it's at a school site, how are we identifying those voices, those students who are no longer within the system, who should be within the system, and tracking people down to hear folks in new ways. I can hear some of the criticisms that will be piled on later as we continue to do this work of why haven't we been doing this before? And the bigger question is what's going to be different now? Like what's changed other than everything has changed. But for some, this story, they've been screaming to be heard for a really long time. And the system has not been responsive to those screams sometimes for decades or generations. And so acknowledging that there's work to do, I know we're going to have other guest speakers and presentations around how all of this starts as very personal work. Dr. Baker, the reason I asked you to talk again about what we expect of leadership and that's part of an evaluation process because it's work that you've been doing for a couple of years with our leaders. So we're now to the point with those leaders to say, not only do we need you to know and understand and work from this place, but we expect it within the work that you do, which I think talks to and speaks to the years of building of work that brought us to this place to be able to make a very intentional shift in this work. So I am grateful for the opportunities that come forward to do the work, acknowledging that we could have and should have been listening better for a long time. And I don't want anybody to think that I don't acknowledge that. And I think you spoke to that idea that we need to do that better. So I think that's important for people to hear, and that this isn't something we just thought of. It isn't something that all of a sudden is important. It isn't something that we care about starting today. It has been work, whether seen or unseen, that we've been trying to do, but we are choosing to do in a much more intentional, visible, inclusive way that makes the table a much bigger table. So I just wanted, there's all kinds of details we could go into about different things, but that this is the place from which we are moving today. I won't say starting, but the place from which we're moving today is important. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to, we have a hand up. Dr. Benitez.
I was counting on you, Dr. Benitez, so I'm glad.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And
I looked over and I didn't.
I'm going to be honest in this space that we have here, and I thank us for this space. I'm struggling right now with my comments, and I'm uncomfortable. And so I'll acknowledge that I'm uncomfortable, and I appreciate you lifting that up, Dr. Brown. Because part of my discomfort is that as a board member, and I'm not comparing myself with our leadership or with our community members, but I oftentimes also struggle with when to engage, how to say things, what I feel about the way things may or may not be perceived or interpreted. So I'm raising that because the research on community engagement really points to 4 things that impact community engagement. So I'm going to respond to your prompt, Dr. Brown, like how do we engage, right? What do we think about? What do we consider when we engage? And some folks don't engage because they can't, right? That's either because of their own circumstances or economic reasons or whatever those reasons are. They oftentimes are not able to engage in ways that our institutions and systems provides avenues for ways to engage. So that's pretty clear, right? And it's not black and white, but we can understand that. Other times, the research says, folks don't engage because they don't feel that their engagement matters, right? So that's more about authenticity, genuine engagement that reflects that the engagement is more than just outreach or communication. Third is that there have been instances when folks engage and something has happened that it has not been a good experience for those folks. And so either trust has been broken or something has happened, right, that they are no longer interested in being engaged. And then what the research shows is that there's this 4th sort of bucket that impacts engagement. And it's that when folks engage, they feel vested because their engagement translates into concrete things that they can see, feel, hear, and experience, right? So that if they're going above and beyond to engage, that it actually results in things that reflect their engagement. And that doesn't mean necessarily that systems and institutions do exactly what folks want them to do, but that folks think that their voice was authentically heard and shapes the consideration, the decision making, the recommendation. So I want to talk about that 4th bucket because oftentimes, and I'm going to use myself and my position, my privileged and very fortunate position, that oftentimes I struggle with, is it worth sharing or saying something that 1, may be perceived in a way that I didn't intend, or 2, that isn't really going to affect change. And I think the research and literature shows that folks are oftentimes perceived and labeled as outliers or agitators or unorthodox or disruptors. And so it's easy for systems and institutions historically to dismiss those voices. All right, so it puts the pressure and the burden on individuals versus representatives of communities. And so when communities see that those individuals are dismissed or are seen as outliers or kind of pigeonholed into, oh, that's that person again, then that is used tactically by institutions to marginalize and suppress those communities. Because then members from those communities feel like if my representative or if a person that represents my community, if that's being done to them, then what is the point or the incentive for me to engage? So I want to bring back that to our leadership conversation. If a culture of an institution is that folks are either afraid or concerned about there being retaliation or their voice being used against them, then it really puts a lot of pressure on individuals within an institution to advocate not just for themselves, but whatever interests or perspectives they're representing. And so I would say that for our purposes of trying to sort of think through a process, that yeah, I think it's important to seek out those voices that maybe we haven't sought out, or those voices that we haven't heard from a lot, particularly within our own rank and file, but also as members of our community and students. But I think what we would need to do, and very candidly, I'm going to say this in the spirit of collaboration and in the spirit of what you shared, Dr. Brown, is that we have to acknowledge that we still structurally, that we have a historical legacy of this, have structural racism embedded in these spaces, formal spaces that we have. And data that we have that's been shared the last couple of days represent that, right? So the disparities that we have, the academic gaps and equity gaps that we have are not just the product of our strategies or our interventions. They're a product that our systems were never meant to be equitable by design, right? So things like GPAs, college admissions criteria, standardized tests, all of these indicators, right? Even our own academic success indicators are rooted in a false meritocracy, are rooted in exclusivity that marginalize not just historically, but present day subgroups that we're looking at. So I think the incentive for folks to engage comes from our institution, and not just LBUSD, right? Our educational institution feeling very uncomfortable when things get called out in a way that makes that you know, I'm going to say it in plain English, that puts our institution on blast. Right. So I think there's a gray area there on how we say things, and I'm not talking about being professional or respectful. That's we need to account for that. But that then it gets conveyed as that person's not a team player, or that person's not with the program. And so it creates this very contentious culture and atmosphere where if we don't acknowledge explicitly that our outcomes right now show racial and ethnic and other social constructs gaps, right? Systemic gaps. And again, me saying that, I want to highlight, me saying that isn't dismissing, nor is my intent to dismiss wonderful work that's been done. It's uplifting that we can do more, right? So it's not dismissive, and I think that's where institutions get sort of hunkered down and worry about, well, what does that say about the ethnic studies that we have done? What does that say about the all means all work that we have done? And it makes it very uncomfortable for me specifically, but for our community members and community reps, to then feel that we're carrying this weight that even though others may feel this way and others may have a different way of delivering the message, that there is this undue burden that communities feel that they have to be the ones to hold our institutions accountable. So I would recommend two things. I spoke a lot there, but this is the opportunity I think that we have to speak. That when we think about whether the application, Dr. Brown, Dr. Baker, or the process, right, that we're going to use, a criteria, that part of what we should look at are folks that have a record of dismantling white supremacy, dismantling racism, dismantling structural inequalities with evidence, right? Because it's one thing for us to engage in a dialogue. It's actually not a lot of folks that have a history, a record of working in these contexts and being successful in the context, because our institutions inhibit folks many times from being successful. So an advocacy, I think, is important, right, as a criteria, a proven, experienced, whether that's lived or training, whatever it is, that you have been an advocate for issues that oftentimes put our institutions at blast, but that are necessary, right? We need outliers, if that's how we're going to refer to folks. Secondly, I think that the process in and of itself, I agree with you that our district should lead, but oftentimes when institutions lead, the strategy that's been historically used, and this is why the acknowledgement piece is so important, is that institutions and systems co-opt, whether that's community members or representatives So although I believe that our institution should be leading, our district should be leading, that it's also important to recognize those spaces where we're not leading, where different perspectives, different voices could be lifted up, because whether we like it or not, as an institution, there is a culture to our decision making. There is a culture to the processes that we engage in. So folks, for instance, as an example, that may have not engaged in our LCAP process, in our CAC process, in our DLAC process, by default, may not want to engage in another formal space where the district is seen, and again, I'm being very transparent, as controlling the narrative, right? So I think acknowledging that is important, but also being open to other spaces where we can be, and I know you didn't say it this way, Dr. Brown, not necessarily the lead, but a co-lead with other groups that may not necessarily be the groups that, as an example, have contracts with our district right now, our vendors with our district right now, because that also puts them in a compromising position of getting paid by us, but then being asked to collaborate with us. So I think those two aspects for me, the criteria and sort of considerations for participation, but as important, the acknowledgement explicitly that our system perpetuates structural inequity for just some of the reasons that I mentioned, but there are many others, and the evidence that we have for all the good work that we've done, for all the wonderful things that we do, for all the good intent, is that we still have disparity in our outcomes, in our deliverables. And so if we go back to sort of the same tactics, then we end up inherently perpetuating those things of why folks didn't engage in the first place. So I think I'm happy to help in any way that I can. I think the communities that I represent are willing allies in this to sort of work on the process, right? The acknowledgement process and the engagement process. And I'm happy that we're doing this. And I think by me saying this, I hope that whoever's watching, whoever's listening, whoever we can refer, that I'm all in with all means all and equity and everything, Dr. Brown, and that's why I'm here. So I'm encouraging folks to think through it the way that I am, that if I had given up on our district, had given up on our wonderful staff, had given up on our teachers, had given up on my colleagues, then I would choose another way to engage. But I'm still here because I believe that our educational system, that this board, that this executive staff, that our district can uphold our commitment to equity. So thank you, Dr. Baker and Dr. Brown.
Thank you for your comments. I wrote notes from what you were talking about, and it will be helpful going forward. And again, not a only opportunity, a beginning of a long conversation. And so I will be coming back to you for more input on these next steps. One of the things we celebrate in Long Beach is that we have so many talented people. And when we have talented people, they have great ideas. And a culture of our work has been that great ideas can be brought to action. So I think Dr. Lund is going to introduce a couple of our really awesome colleagues that are here. Mrs. Kerr, did I see your hand?
I did. I just wanted to add something, actually repeat something that I said yesterday, that all of these processes for me are an and, not an or, in addition to. And I appreciate Dr. Benitez's insight and his expertise in this area. He's been doing it for a really long time. And the other and I want to add is that as a board, we all represent communities. And our communities are diverse across our city, we know that. And part of when we look at what we bring to the table, to not diminish the and of all of our communities that we represent in different ways, who come to us with the same kinds of stories and different kinds of stories, and understanding, again, it's making the table really big, and the and of the gifts and talents and communities that we all bring to the table, I think, is really important.
Thank you. I would just like to add before you get started, that we can look at what our district has done historically, and in ways that our district has outperformed other districts in what we've done, the work that we've done through an equity lens that informs policies going back to the 1990s with Carl Cohn, and with us being the largest public school system to institute a uniform policy, and that was through an equity lens. That was to kind of level the playing field so that kids would be seen in a more uniform way, that some kids wouldn't be seen as coming to school in designer clothes and other kids in secondhand clothes, that kind of thing. And that was in an effort to help how kids felt about themselves in a school setting. To more recently, we have put our money where our mouth is as far as subsidizing the cost of AP tests and free SAT prep, free SATs, the college readiness report. These are the things that we have done in an effort to level that playing field, because we are a system that has always cared about uplifting all students and providing for all students. So I appreciate everybody's comments. Dr. Benitez, Ms. Kerr, I think we all want to go forward. We may do that in a different way. We may see things differently, but we all want to go forward. I appreciate the comment about it's an and situation, because we have a foundation. We have always done this work, and we need to build on that. And Dr. Benitez, you have some ideas on how we can build on that, how we can go forward. I appreciate the work that's being done, Dr. Brown, Dr. Baker, because we will be able to go forward in a positive way, and that will benefit everybody, because at the end of the day, we are all here to serve the students and our families in this community. Thank you, Dr. Lund.
You are welcome. It is in the spirit of actually, that we're sharing our equity work and that work across our departments in an effort to really embed equity in everything that we do, like I said, across our teams. So I'm here merely as a representative of our level offices to talk about that equity work and that leadership work that you were alluding to, and just to elaborate a little bit more on that work at the local school site. Understanding that obviously our schools are the ones that are most connected locally to our communities, and with that potential to make change. So as representing obviously our elementary, middle, and K-8 and high school office here, looking at our work on two fronts, one at the school level and the school level analysis work. So Dr. Baker made reference to our equity audit that we had done at the local school level. This is really about 2 years now of work, building on the building equity text as a framework for our analysis of equity within the school sites, and the pyramid there, the triangle, is the equity taxonomy of that work. And looking at those 5 tiers of the work, and we asked our sites to do an analysis based on that equity audit and to establish goals around that audit. Likewise, at our levels, we did a similar analysis of our schools' work and set up level office goals around that work. And you may recognize that just from our presentations from last year to the board around our level specific work and some examples of that. So at the middle school level, we were doing some significant work this past year targeting that level two around social emotional engagement. And the restorative work that we were doing with CCEJ, the 24 hours of training that we did with all of our administrators, the 30 hours of training that we did with our counselors, to really introduce the restorative justice work at our school level, broadly speaking. We did a master schedule symposium targeting level 3 around the opportunities to learn and that opportunity gap. And analyzing some of the systemic issues that we have as a system that create de facto tracking within our system. And how do we address that at all levels? So being really strategic around that and what opportunity gaps exist and how do we create better opportunities to learn for all of our students. So the school level work there on the left is really in conjunction with the leadership level work that Dr. Baker had alluded to. So the top right there, that image is the lens of systemic oppression, and really a framework by which we analyze the work at an individual, interpersonal, and systemic level, and the role of a leader in doing so. So that leadership work from a coaching standpoint that we have embedded throughout our system, the coaching that our leaders do with each other, the coaching work that Mr. Moskowitz, Dr. Camarino, and I do with our principals, the coaching that our principals do with their teachers on a regular basis, and incorporating the equity leadership dispositions into that coaching work. Building upon that and really systematizing our equity work, on the bottom right, you see part of our leadership rubric, which includes 7 domains of leadership, everything from teaching and learning to environment and equity, communication and engagement, professionalism and disposition, strategy and planning. So all 7 different aspects of leadership, and examining where we could incorporate the equity leadership disposition work into our rubric itself. And we went back and forth on, does this live within each of the leadership domains, or does equity live as just one piece of those domains? And we made the decision to incorporate equity into every aspect of the leadership work. And I'd like to thank Bev Moutet and Ed Samuels, who really took the work that we had done at the K-12 level with all of our leaders, analyzing the equity leadership dispositions and where they may fit, and then really seeing where they could incorporate that strategic language into our leadership rubrics. So that language, you will find there references to opportunity gaps and additional opportunities for differentiated support, examination of beliefs, expectations, and biases, cultural responsiveness and cultural proficiency in the work. And how does that interplay throughout all of those 7 domains? And the highlighted sections that you see there in the bottom right are all the changes that were made in this particular domain specific to equity. And looking across all 7 domains, you would see similar changes. So we introduced this to our principals last week as a launching off point. It will become part of their goal setting and obviously part of the evaluation work that we do with them on a regular basis. So it's really framing the work around the school level systemic work of the school site and the goal setting and the action plans that school leaders put into place, but then also the role of the leader and shifting that role of the leader, as I think you were alluding to, Mrs. Kerr, around how we do business and how do we change how we do business to better meet the needs of our students. So that's just a quick summary around how at the level office we are incorporating equity into our work. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kale to talk about the work from an OCIPD standpoint and where equity is really coming to play on multiple levels within curriculum, instruction, and professional development.
So part of what we do in OCIPD is to support the work that's taking place out at the schools. So when we think about centering our work in OCIPD around equity and excellence, we have an important new contributor to that work, and the leader is going to be Dr. Pam Lovett. She is the new coordinator of equity and excellence. And if she looks familiar or sounds familiar, that's because she has been with us for some time now and has led our GATE department. So she's bringing a lot of knowledge to the position. So some of the things that Pam is going to be working on are doing things like promoting excellence and equity for traditionally marginalized youth. So for example, doing things like addressing issues of disproportionality in our GATE identification process, looking at other practices as well. She will focus on curriculum and professional learning to counter anti-Blackness and other isms and phobias based on race, gender, class, color, and sexual orientation. And I'm going to talk just a tiny bit more about that in just a second. And then building the understanding and skills of our leaders and teachers to be anti-racist. So working on things like designing and facilitating varied professional learning opportunities for teachers, principals, central office administrators. And really a lot of what she's going to do is help us with our willingness to experience the discomfort that we need to experience as we work to address real issues around race and equity. I'm going to take us on I'm sorry, I'm going to go really fast because we have some people waiting to speak. But I want to tell you about a short-term example of the equity work that she's working on with us. So right now, as you know, this slide comes from the student survey that we gave. And if you recall, we had groups of students who told us that they experienced challenges at a much higher level than other groups of students. And so right away, we know we're going into this thing with equity issues. We also know that 3 out of 4 parents told us they wanted grades. I know this Board of Education heard parents and students and teachers come in and talk to you about the need for grades. So we are planning to issue grades, just like we would during a regular school year. However, what we're working on is putting together a set of resources and grading guidelines, keeping equity front and center to give our principals the tools that they need to have these kinds of conversations with their teachers as they're coming back. So they'll hear that from their principals, and they'll also hear that message from our curriculum leaders during teacher training week next week. And then just one example of a long-term sort of project. So we are going to be conducting a curriculum equity audit, and that means taking a look at all of our documents with a real critical eye. So things like the courses that we offer, the course outlines, the unit guides, and really looking at how do we create a curriculum with Black students in mind, front and center. I do want to say that we've got the Ethnic and Identity Studies course that's been taught at the high school level, and when I come back on September 2nd to our board meeting, you're going to be hearing about a new Ethnic Studies course that is going to be taught at the middle school level at Cubberley this year. So making some progress, but really what Pam will do is be able to address that whole kind of agenda around that ethnic studies framework. And then just as Jill has mentioned previously, we will be convening an advisory committee and using other forms of stakeholder engagement to get input from our African American and Latinx youth and families so that we can gain their perspectives in this work. And so I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Erin Simon, who's going to give you a little bit of information from our Office of School Support Services.
Well, good afternoon. So the Office of School Support Services, within our office, there's a strong commitment to equity that promotes a welcoming and caring school climate for all students, a major component of which is building and sustaining a culture that embraces diversity. So you all heard from Dr. Rachel Heenan this morning, and she expressed some things just around equity, whether it's regards to assessments and supports for our students. So within the special education division, ensuring equity for students with disabilities, we're working to provide appropriate tools to access curriculum and also to have interaction with peers. We know that our students with disabilities may need different types of devices and technology to help them, especially our preschool age kids. Chromebooks usually don't work for them, so iPads, just because of mobility and other things that are happening, may be needed. And other software that students have just to ensure they have equitable access to teachers, classmates, and other district supports. Ensuring assessment procedures, we talked about that, right? And just the validity and reliability within those assessments. We want to ensure that our assessment procedures and interventions are in place that do not promote an overrepresentation of African American students identified within a disability. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's work and deep work that we're going to do this year to really delve into students who are being overrepresented in special education, but also those students who have been identified with ED, with an emotional disabled diagnosis. Within our homeless division, and we have Nancy Azumi and Maribel Gonzalez who have been working in this division for such a long time. They are experts in this field, but they are working to strive to achieve educational equity to help our homeless youth feel safe, stable, and supported at school by working closely with their parent guardians and also their community agencies and school staff. And within that, you know, there's this terminology that we use, Maslow before we bloom, which is typically used to communicate how humans need their basic needs met before academic learning can be fully embraced. And we recognize that for our students who are looking for food and housing and technology and also clothes, some things that we try to refer our families to very quickly to ensure they have those necessities. Helping new students feel welcome and provide a sense of belonging to their new school. Sometimes our students can be embarrassed about their situation, so we're very confidential and very protective for our students who are homeless, and also have a great system working with our counselors, just so there's confidentiality built around their situation and also their parents' situation as well. Ensure that the necessary school and community resources are provided. This is something that we work very hard with, keeping our connections with our community agencies and also building new relationships. And those relationships don't necessarily have to be in Long Beach. Sometimes there are great resources out in Orange County or in Los Angeles that can benefit our families, especially knowing that they are residing in shelters that are not just within the Long Beach community, but are also within other counties within our state as well. So something I wanted to highlight. Additionally, equity in education for such students. We want to make sure that there's also professional development that happens to prepare our staff who are working with such students, and also with the implementation of trauma-informed practices for our schools, so they understand the trauma that manifests itself within our students who are homeless. Now, going into our foster youth services, we aim to achieve educational equity to help foster youth feel safe, stable, and supported at school by working closely with the student, educational rights holder, our DCFS social workers, and school staff. Again, that Maslow before we bloom philosophy, we know that many of our foster youth do face trauma based on what they go through. So we want to make sure that we are accessing what they need and also providing the right support for them as well. Again, helping those students feel welcome and provide a sense of belonging to their new school, ensure that we have the appropriate community resources, make sure that we have counseling and things of that nature to engage them. We've worked very closely with LACO, our County Office of Education, to provide tutoring for students last year. It was in-person tutoring before COVID, and during school closure, they had virtual tutoring for students who are in foster care or just who are deemed as foster. And also ensuring that our homeless and our foster youth also have access to technology such as Chromebooks and hotspots. We know that sometimes with our homeless families, and we're working on this with some of our agencies and shelters, some of those shelters do not allow internet access just due to the confidentiality of parents and to keep them safe as well. So working on ways that we can ensure that those students have access to the curriculum and also to the education which they are deserving of. And then within student placement, which is overseen and really worked by Dr. LaShondra Pralo, who has done such a great job in her role as our student placement and discipline coordinator, administrator, and also our principal of the ACT program, our Adult Community Transition Program. But she has worked to establish, and will be working to establish, multi-tier systems of support to provide preventative and proactive school discipline, practices such as learning environments that help students of color feel a sense of belonging, challenge and love at school. We heard about this just yesterday about some of the data that Mr. Chris Brown pulled based on the sense of belonging that many of our students feel. We want to make sure that we have conversations, we work around that, even with our disciplinary practices. That's what we see as equity being very important in regards to that. Incorporating social emotional learning practices into everyday curriculum, which also comes down to student placement and discipline, looking at our biases and things of that nature, embracing cultural diversity, understanding what trauma means and what trauma happens within certain communities and how we can address that with our students without being punitive, but actually having conversations and getting them the right support that they need at the school sites or elsewhere. Creating effective behavior systems in schools that are equitable for all students. Promoting dialogue, respect, accountability, and community through the use of restorative justice practices. And many of our school sites have really engaged and embraced RJ to help them with this work. Treating behavior as a method of communication and as such aim to understand the underlying factors and provide alternative methods to communication, which I believe is important as well. So again, there's some equity work that has started, some equity work that will begin, and also in consultation alongside our key stakeholders, our students, our staff, our parents, and the community. And we think that this is something that is needed in order for us to move the work along and make sure that everything we do has equity from, again, foster youth, homeless youth, students placement, and also within our special education division. And now I'll call back Dr. Christy Kale to the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Simon.
So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the next group of speakers. They've come to you to share with you the story of the Black Lives Matter Book Club, which we're calling a grassroots call to action in the area of equity. The idea for the book club started with some reading that Ashley Rhodes did, a conversation she held with her mentor, and a Twitter thread after the death of George Floyd, and it got her thinking about how she could personally take action to fight for change in racist policies and thinking. So she tweeted out, "Book club, anyone?" And she got an overwhelming yes response. So 5 organizers, 18 moderators, 206 book club participants later, they're here to tell you a story about working to center Black voices and creating a safe space for conversations about racism and change. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce these 4 amazing leaders who I've had the pleasure of working with and knowing for several years now. So I don't know if you want to come up one at a time or you want to start, but so we'll start with Ashley Rhodes, who is an equity and inclusion coach working in OCIPD and OSSS. Raquel Welch-Kitchen, Assistant Director of Equity Leadership and Talent Development. Daniette Armstrong-Lee, and are you waving so they know who you are? Assistant Principal at Bancroft Middle School, and Janelle Harmon, Administrative Assistant in HRS. So come on up, Ashley. And I'm gonna wipe down for you. Oh, that was the slide to introduce them, and now. Just push the button.
Thank you, Dr. Kale. Thank you, Dr. Baker, for inviting us here today. And thank you to our board members for supporting this grassroots effort to grow in our understanding of privilege, power, and systems of oppression. My name's Ashley Rhodes, and after the death of George Floyd, I felt despair. Another senseless murder of a Black man. He cried out for his mother. I'm a mother, and I was outraged. I felt this intense need to find a community who was working towards some sort of action, and it came with a Twitter post. Book club, anyone? I was overwhelmed by the response. As a white woman, I feared the task of organizing such an effort, feeling ill-equipped to talk about racism. But in organizing this book club that felt really big for a lot of reasons, there was a community in Long Beach Unified School District that was willing to be brave for change and show up and do this work. So as we continued to organize, to my surprise, over 200 educators showed up. It was a Long Beach Unified School District community that felt a need to do something now, a true testament to this movement and to Black lives mattering. So growing in our understanding of privilege, power, and systems of oppression, the Black Lives Matter Summer Book Club was born, and the work began. So this next slide shares the titles of the books that were chosen for this space. So it began of a list of 14 books that were compiled by the group, where anyone could add a title along with a description of the book. It was really important to this space to feel inclusive and that all voices were being listened to. So the group decided to choose the top 4 so that participants could have a choice. And from there, the books were purchased by the superintendent's office. Former Superintendent Chris Steinhauser purchased our first round of books for our group. And then it was distributed actually out here from the board building. Participants could then ensure a safe space for themselves by choosing a Long Beach Unified School District moderator from a bio that was created by each moderator so that they could align to the book of their choice. So these were the book selections that were chosen. 28% of our participants read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. 21% chose to read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. 21% read Biased by Jennifer Eberhardt. And then 21% read We Want to Do More Than Survive by Bettina Love. So this next slide shows some data from participants that we collected via survey, that we surveyed participants after the culmination of the end of our first round of book club. So we found it important for participants to really establish what their whys were for joining this space. So we asked the question, I joined because 91% of participants said that they wanted to be a part of a systems change within the district and/or community. 78% wanted to learn how to engage in difficult, courageous conversations around racism and inequities. And 72% said that they wanted to learn about the recent issues that have surfaced around racism and inequities. So with the amount of participants that came to the table, we decided that we needed to use a moderator model. And we wanted to ensure that we had elevated and centered Black voices as essential to this work. So from there, we had moderator meetings to support each other. And I have to say that the amount of talent and willingness of these moderators who came into this space to be brave, to set a tone of vulnerability, to allow participants to dig deeper in their learning was pretty amazing. The following educators listed on this slide were our moderators. So for a numbers breakdown of the people in this work, we had a total of 5 facilitators/organizers, 18 moderators, 200 plus participants, 4 books, over 7 weeks this summer. I'm now going to invite my other facilitator and counterpart, Raquel Welch-Kitchen, into this space to share her experiences.
I have new glasses, so bear with me. We'll see how this works. First, I want to say good afternoon to everyone, Madam President, board members, Dr. Baker, executive staff, and all in our school community. Thank you for the opportunity to share our work. My name is Raquel Welch-Kitchen. After the death of George Floyd, I cried for 12 days straight because I kept hearing the plea of him calling for his dead mother over and over again. Each time it pierced my entire heart. I am a married mother of 3. 2 boys and a girl. My baby boy is 16 and well over 6 feet tall, and he calls me mommy more than anyone on earth. The thought of him, it was too much. The book club gave me a chance to help dry my eyes and raise my spirits. I was able to turn my heartbreak into grassroots action in my school community. And Ashley, I thank you for that. To start this work, we wanted to ground everyone that signed up. We began looking at the Black Lives Matter movement itself and directing our participants to go and do the research. And we wanted to say their names, the beautiful Black women who gave birth to this historic movement, Patrice Concolors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. We wanted to remind them that our work entails us centering Black voices, and that we wanted to create a space for historical and factual dialogue about white supremacy in America. We wanted to challenge their thinking and open ourselves up for self-reflection, and to embrace an anti-racist stance when thinking about ideas, behaviors, policies, and racial justice. To be sure we had the right mindset, we wanted to create a color-brave space. Here are some of the understandings, the norms that we set and reviewed at every meeting to ensure that everyone respects the space that we have and that we can have open, real dialogue. We were purposeful in building a community, so we focused on these norms. We were intentional about centering Black voices when talking about race, and we wanted to honor and be aware of how this conversation and the current climate may awaken trauma experienced by Black bodies. I have to say, this experience this summer was a master class in building community for over 200 people in our school community. Each meeting began with a community building activity, a reminder of our color brave space, and an invitation to this work that's centered on Black voices that sounded something like this. All are welcome to this important conversation about racism, how it manifests itself in our society and in the lives of Black people. For generations, this narrative has been silenced. She wants to scream and holler, but she can't breathe. Her daughters can't breathe. Her sons can't breathe. The cost of this silence is death to her people. If we do not bring this horror into the light, it will continue to fester in the belly of our souls. It will remain infected. We will remain infected with cruel speech and wicked ways. Attention to this space is not an academic exercise, but the act of liberating our hearts and minds. We are working to put humanity first in our conversations and actions. In the midst of this work, when we find ourselves uncomfortable, only then are we on the precipice of creating new meaning in our lives. So I tell you, hold on. You have the chance to influence change when it really matters. And I'll go ahead and invite Daniette up.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for this opportunity. My name is Daniette Lee, and after the death of George Floyd, I immediately thought about the death of Emmett Till. And I knew that we were in the midst of a second civil rights movement. I thought about the time when I learned about it, and I asked my grandmother, "Grandma, what did you do to contribute to that movement in the 1960s?" And the look that she gave me was just a pure surprise. It took her back. And I will never forget that moment. That's the reason why I wanted to be a part of this book club. I wanted to be a part of this book club to make a difference that my daughter will remember and her future children will remember. So I thank you, Ashley, for that opportunity. Now, I want to take a look at some data. All right, here you'll see an overwhelming positive response. Over 99% of our participants felt a sense of community within their groups. Also, if you look to the right, you'll see top 5 trending comments. And these were just the reasons why the participants would recommend their book to someone else. And you'll see in those recommendations, the reasons were very reflective. It challenged my thinking. It opened my eyes. It made me really think about the history and the data on racism. Great recommendations that were listed there. Also, we see here in the next slide, we get a chance to get a picture of who are our participants within the book club. So we see over 50% of our participants within the book clubs were teachers. Awesome. And we see over 20% of our participants within the book club, they were administrators. What was also nice to see was that we had a great representation of different staff members within Long Beach Unified School District. And I just want to give a shout out because I do see Megan Kerr, thank you so much, and David Zaid, they were also participants as well, and anyone else, I just want to give a shout out. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to open the floor for Janelle.
Thank you, Danette.
Hello there. My name's Janelle Harmon, and after the death of George Floyd, I felt a deep responsibility as a white person to learn more because I just felt like this is not something that we are taught in classrooms. And unless you take it upon yourself to dig deeper, you just think the world is the way that it is, and you don't understand the reason why we got to the place that we're at. And so, as a mother as well, of 3 multiracial children, I felt a sort of double responsibility because I owe it to them to be able to explain to them how we got here. These systems in our society have been built to benefit white people while causing harm to Black people and other peoples of color. And so while most white people will say they're not racist, unless we, as the white folks, are actively dismantling racism, we're enabling it. And so participating in this book club and using my voice as a moderator was a step for me to begin dismantling racism amongst our own community of educators. So again, looking at the data, about 100 people replied to this survey. So it's not everyone, but it's about half of our participants. But almost 80% of them gave a rating of 5 out of 5 in terms of, was this a valuable learning experience? And over 95% gave it a rating of a 4 or a 5. And so I will say that I know that our teachers and administrators and counselors, they're a critical bunch when they're not satisfied, right? We've heard that from our groups over the last few weeks. And so to come up with numbers like this, where 95% felt it was valuable, says a lot. And so it's really a reflection of the work that the moderators did collaboratively to lead what we called the hard work of heart work. Additionally, you'll see on the side there that they came up with ways, actionable steps that they want to take moving forward, both individually and collectively. They want to center Black voices and be better listeners. They want to educate themselves and reflect on their own biases. They want to advocate for racial justice and engage in anti-racist work, both in and outside of the classroom. They want to speak out against racism in their own sphere of influence. And they want to advocate for real change in school and policy. And so again, when you look at the number of hours that they spent, I think we all know that what you put into something is what you get out of it. And I get it, it was summer, right? Like, this is a group of people who did this voluntarily, unpaid, because they want to make the world a better place. And so you can see most of the group spent between 11 and 20 hours of their own time. But there were people who spent upwards of 40 hours. And when I just did some real round math based on these, and again, this is only half of our group, this accounts for about 2,400 hours of voluntary, unpaid time that people spent. And so I'm looking at my friend Yumi. Yumi, that's about $72,000 of professional development work that was unpaid, right? These are people who are doing the work on their own. I share these numbers because there is a deep desire within the community to do better, right? That's kind of what Dr. Brown was bringing up. We have done a lot of work, but we all know there's more work to do. And you have a committed base of people who are ready and willing to commit to this work. So I'll turn it back over to Ashley.
Thank you, Janelle.
So where are we going with this work? What are our next steps? The number one response that we got back from participants was that this work needs to continue. That one round of a book club isn't the answer to all of our issues around systemic racism, the policies, practices we have going on at our current school sites within our school systems. And so we opened it up with the go-ahead from Dr. Baker's office is that she's going to purchase our round 2 books for a round 2 of our book club. So in our survey, we gave our original 14 list again of the 14 books that were compiled originally. And so from the data gathered from our survey, these are the top 4 new titles, along with a repeat of the 2 books from the first round that people wanted to choose to read. So respondents said in our last book club meeting, which occurred on August 13th, was that they are all interested in a round 2, and that we are going to continue to invite in whoever else wants to come to the table and do this work. And I think it's been really important to this movement to have it feel completely inclusive. We've had teachers, administrators, board members, school psychologists, counselors, classified staff, all coming to the table because we have said yes to everybody who has wanted to come into the space. So we have a tentative start date once we get school reopenings underway of October 1st to begin this new work, and we will be tweeting out more information to come along with a new spreadsheet where participants can put their names on. We'll be inviting in anybody who wants to moderate, and we're going to go for round 2 beginning in October. So I'm going to turn it back over to Raquel to close us out.
Okay. This will work. Before I close out, I just have to say I'm looking at all the faces of people that contributed to my leadership over the years, and I'm happy. I have had conversations with you about my personal desires about working with students and at my school, and you all have been encouraging and supportive, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, so thank you very much to contributing to my growth. But Dr. Baker, I want to go to you. When you first started getting involved in our leadership programs and we were able to talk to you, she always brought us back to the why we are doing this work, to think about that in her calm, relaxing tone. And I want to leave you with the why we are doing this work. This is a poem I wrote. The other thing about participating in the book club and all that's going on, I've been able to reclaim myself as the poet that I am. I think in prose, that's just who I am. So this may be a new me you're being introduced to, but this is who I am. Life story. I know something's wrong when all of a people's songs are about undergoing, overcoming, and trying to get there. I'm not sad, I won't cry, but it seems awfully unfair. The burden of ancestral trauma we must bear. Night in and night out, this role I play forces me to face odds against an ungodly God. Our ears endure a piercing ring when we hear a familiar scream of another heartbeat meeting its doom. With adrenaline flowing, there's no time to fear. Death is around the corner and my end is near. But instinctively, I act and exercise my will to survive. And suddenly, my desire is shifted into overdrive. In this land where hard work and opportunity is the prize, somehow, something, someone is cursing for me to meet my demise. I watch lives passing away like leaves in the sky.
sorrowful tears being carried away by the wind. Sometimes I feel this life is no deal, and I will never win. Because it seems to me, living black and trying to be free is a systematic process of killing me. But I know what comes in the morning. So I rise. I take a breath and decide to keep living. And with faith, my faith, I await a sign, something bright, something divine, to assure me this madness will end. This is what I know in all that I see in my daily experience of living black and just trying to be me. Thank you, everyone. We'll take questions if you like.
I don't know if we have any questions.
I just have a comment. Thank you. Thank you for telling the story. It was an honor to be a part of it. And part of our Color Brave space is acknowledging power and position. And I was acutely aware of power and position every week that I met with my small group of 12 and questioned how I could contribute, how could I listen, how could I be in the space. And I have to say how welcoming it was. And I can't wait to do book 2. I was so glad the one that I picked was on the top 4. We have incredible people in this district. I know Myrna's hiding in a truck somewhere. She was part of the group. We have incredible people who want to do incredible work. So when we talk about equity work, we can talk theoretical, we can talk systems, but I got to bear witness to a couple hundred people who, as they encounter students or not, in whatever way they encounter or support students moving forward, are going to do it differently because of these 7 weeks and because of your leadership, because of your moderating, because of your sharing your stories of who you are and calling on us to share together. And I don't think we can't talk about how wonderful that grassroots work is, because as somebody in my small group said, we're building an army of folks who are going to do this differently. And so I was glad to be a part of the tweet and incredibly blessed and honored to be a part of the work. So thank you for sharing the story so perfectly today.
Thank you. Dr. Williams.
Yes, Raquel, I came in on the tail end of that, but I know about your work because we worked together for a number of years, going back to the project at Hamilton Middle School with the young men who we were trying to raise into scholars. And you were the point person on the ground for us at Hamilton with those young men for 3 years. That we met systematically over a period of time with those young men. And the end result of that is we saw some young men who changed, whose behavior changed, whose grade point average changed, whose demeanor changed, and I want to thank you for that. The second piece was the opportunity to work with you on the advanced placement project that we started off together with just you initially and Dr. Minnie Douglas, and that grew, and over a few period of years, we engaged in some long-standing work to create more opportunities for kids of color in this district to get involved in AP. And that paid off very well for us in the long run. So again, I want to just thank you for your continued work, your interest in moving things forward in this district. And you've been a blessing to so many, and you continue to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Benitez, did you have something?
I'm good, thank you. Just want to thank the moderators for sharing and for their reflections and perspectives. So just very appreciative of the work that the book club engaged in, and upholding our district values and commitment to equity. So thank you for your words today.
Thank you. It's incredibly powerful for you to come and speak and lay your heart bare. It's not just for this room, but this goes out to the public. It strikes me as being not surprising that it is a group of mothers that have come together, because we connect on a different level. We connect heart to heart. Raquel, when you're up there talking about how you have 3 children, you know, I do. I know Miss Kerr does as well. 2 boys and a girl, just happens to be the same configuration. But when we as mothers come together, watch out, because it's that whole mama bear thing. And it would not be the first time that a group of mothers got together to change things. This is how PTA got started. It was a group of mothers. They saw a problem, they saw something, then they got together to change that, to come up with solutions. That was over 100 years ago. That was, and that it is still a strong movement. It is an all-volunteer movement. So when you're talking about getting together and having this book club, and that being a volunteer movement as well, this is powerful, and we appreciate the work that's being done. We appreciate everybody putting in their time. Initially, I think it's work that needs to be done for us personally, but ultimately it's going to benefit us as a community, us as a district, and especially our students. So thank you very much. Do we have, Dr. Baker?
I just want to close us out in thanking Ashley and Raquel and Daniette and Janelle for just bringing incredible voice to this room. From those who couldn't be in the room with us today, the more than 200 participants, and those who followed what you were doing and maybe couldn't participate but saw what you were doing. And so in that spirit, let's not let this be a moment, but a movement. And for those who have not yet engaged with the book club, my challenge to you to call in to double the number of people in the second round. So I heard somewhere between 200 and 250. That means we're calling in another 200 to 250. And there is plenty of opportunity to buy books for every single one who participates. So let's not let it be a moment. Let's take what you have done and continue it as a movement. And I thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And with that, I think we break for lunch. And then we reconvene here for closed session at 2 o'clock? 3:30. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking committee meetings. Reconvene 3:30, closed session right here.